The ancient city of Ur is the ultimate archaeological paradox, a metropolis that seems to have appeared out of nowhere. It exploded into history with fully formed skyscrapers, complex laws, and mass production, in a time when most of the world was still waking up from the Stone Age. For decades, scholars have wrestled with the Sumerian problem, the unsettling reality that this civilization has no primitive infancy. To the Victorian excavators who first brushed away the Iraqi sand, it looked as if Ur had been dropped from the sky. But the truth buried beneath the Great Ziggurat is far more complex and significantly more terrifying than a sudden miracle. Welcome to the cradle of civilization, located in modern-day Decoded province, Iraq. Around 3800 BCE, while Europe was still struggling with basic agriculture, Ur was already experimenting with the machinery of the state. But why here, and how? The traditional narrative tells us that the Sumerians arrived with their language and technology ready-made, but deep earth soundings and stratigraphic analysis tell a different story, one of violent adaptation. Ur did not appear by magic. It was forged in the crucible of the erratic Euphrates River. The transition from the humble Ubaid period, characterized by simple painted pottery and reed huts, to the industrial juggernaut of the Uruk period was driven by a single desperate necessity: water control. The invention of the plow and the sailboat weren't just conveniences, they were survival mechanisms that allowed the population to explode. Yet for nearly a century, the myth persisted that Ur was an anomaly, a planted city. Today, we are going to peel back the layers of mud and time to reveal the forensic reality of the first true city, the engineering marvels that kept it standing, and the brutal, bloody rituals that sent its kings to the afterlife. In 1929, the legendary archaeologist Sir Leonard Woolley was digging a test shaft, known as Pit F, deep into the soil beneath the royal cemetery. He was looking for the bedrock, the very beginning of the settlement. He dug through the debris of the early dynastic period, through layers of broken pottery and ash, until suddenly the history stopped. Woolley's workers hit a layer of pure, water-laid clay. It was sterile. No pottery, no bones, no ash. Just clean, packed silt. This layer wasn't a few inches thick. It was nearly 3 meters deep, a massive blanket of mud sealing off the bottom of the pit. Woolley instructed his team to keep digging through the clay. After tunneling through 8 feet of this sterile mud, they struck debris again. Primitive pottery from a village that had existed thousands of years prior. Woolley famously telegraphed London with a message that would shake the foundations of biblical archaeology: "We have found the flood." For a brief moment, the world believed Woolley had found physical proof of the global deluge described in Genesis and the Epic of Gilgamesh. He believed this massive clay deposit was the scar left by Noah's flood. However, modern geology and radiocarbon dating have given us a more precise, albeit less romantic, explanation. We now know this was not a global event that covered Mount Ararat, but a catastrophic regional event, a massive river avulsion. Around 3000 BCE, a combination of rising sea levels in the Persian Gulf and a massive surge in the Euphrates caused the river to burst its banks with apocalyptic force. The water didn't just rise, it buried the entire delta region under meters of silt, wiping out the Ubaid settlements instantly. The survivors who returned didn't rebuild a village, they built a city designed to survive the god's wrath. The sudden appearance of Ur was actually a rebirth after a near-total extinction event. Rising from the flat plains of the delta is the most iconic structure of Mesopotamia, the Ziggurat of Ur. Commissioned by King Ur-Nammu around 2100 BCE, this wasn't just a temple. It was a machine connecting the earth to the heavens, dedicated to Nana, the moon god. To understand the genius of Ur, you have to look at the engineering of this mountain. It is a solid mass of mud brick, 210 feet long and 150 feet wide. But building a solid mountain of mud in a region that floods is a recipe for disaster. Mud brick acts like a sponge. It absorbs moisture from the ground and the air. If the core gets wet, it swells. If it swells, The outer casing of baked brick will shatter, and the entire structure will explode from the inside out. Ur-Nammu's engineers understood fluid dynamics. They invented a ventilation system that modern architects would envy. If you look closely at the walls of the ziggurat today, you will see deep, rectangular holes piercing the brickwork. These are not windows, they are weeper holes. These shafts run deep into the core of the ziggurat, filled with broken pottery and reeds. They act as wicks, allowing the moisture trapped inside the massive mud core to evaporate out into the desert air. The structure was designed to sweat. Furthermore, the builders used a mortar that was virtually indestructible, bitumen. By harvesting natural asphalt from nearby seepages, they created a waterproof glue that prevented the saline groundwater from wicking up into the foundation. Visually, the ziggurat is a masterpiece of optical illusion. There is not a single straight line in the structure. The walls are slightly convex, curving outward. The vertical lines slant inward. This use of entasis, a technique later used by the Greeks on the Parthenon, tricks the human eye into seeing the building as perfectly straight and imposingly stable, preventing the illusion that the heavy walls are toppling over you. While the ziggurat represents the intellect of Ur, the royal tombs reveal its nightmares. In the 1920s, Woolley uncovered 1,800 graves, but 16 stood out. These were the royal tombs, containing wealth that rivaled the discovery of King Tutankhamun. The most famous is the tomb of Queen Puabi. Inside, Woolley found her body adorned with a cape of gold, silver, lapis lazuli, and carnelian beads. But she was not alone. In the adjacent Great Death Pit, Woolley found the bodies of 74 attendants, 6 men and 68 women, neatly arranged in rows, dressed in their finest ceremonial regalia. Woolley, writing for a 1930s audience, painted a romantic picture of their death. He suggested that these loyal servants, driven by religious devotion, marched into the pit, drank a cup of poison, and drifted peacefully to sleep to accompany their queen. It was a tragic but serene image of loyalty. Here is the reality check. Modern forensic science has shattered Woolley's peaceful sleep theory. In 2011, researchers at the University of Pennsylvania performed CT scans on the surviving skulls from the death pits, specifically from grave PG1237. The scans revealed no trace of poison. Instead, they found shattered bone. The victims had been killed by blunt force trauma. The fractures were consistent with the blow of a copper battle axe, specifically the Type A16 spiked axe found in the tombs. These men and women were not willing suicides. They were executed. They were struck on the side or back of the head, likely while kneeling. But the horror goes deeper. The CT scans revealed something else: delamination of the skull bone. This specific type of bone separation only happens when the bone is heated and dried. This implies that the bodies were not killed in the pit. They were executed elsewhere, and their bodies were processed, possibly smoked or treated with mercury sulfide to preserve them, before being dragged into the tomb and arranged in those neat rows. It was a gruesome piece of theater, a staged tableau of death designed to display the absolute power of the monarch. As we dive deeper into the dark secrets of the royal tombs, ask yourself, would you be willing to follow your leader into the afterlife if you knew the violent truth? Let me know in the comments below. Buried alongside these victims was one of the most important artifacts in history, the Standard of Ur. This hollow wooden box, inlaid with shell, limestone, and lapis lazuli, gives us the only visual record of the Sumerian military machine. The war panel is terrifying. It depicts the Sumerian phalanx, a wall of soldiers with copper helmets and studded cloaks holding spears. Ahead of them, war chariots trample naked enemies. But look closely at the animals pulling the chariots. They aren't horses. Horses hadn't been introduced to the region yet. These are onagers, wild Asiatic asses, known for being ill-tempered and difficult to control. The fact that the Sumerians domesticated these beasts for war is a testament to their dominance over nature. The peace panel shows the fruit of this violence, a banquet. We see a hierarchy that is strictly enforced. The king is depicted larger than everyone else, a technique called hierarchical scaling. Below him are the nobles, then the commoners, and finally the slaves. This isn't just art, it's political propaganda. It tells the viewer that order is maintained by the king's relationship with the gods and his command over the army. This society was governed by the oldest known law code in the world, predating Hammurabi by 3 centuries. The Code of Ur-Nammu was surprisingly progressive. While Hammurabi later popularized the brutal eye for an eye justice, Ur-Nammu's code was transactional. If you knocked out a man's eye, you didn't lose your own. You paid a fine of 1 mina of silver. It was a society built on commerce, contracts, and compensation, not just retribution. Deep within the sacred precinct of the city, archaeologists found something that didn't make sense. In the residence of the high priestess, dating to the Neo-Babylonian period, around 530 BCE, they found a collection of artifacts that were already ancient at that time. There were boundary stones from 1400 BCE, tablets from 2000 BCE, and statues that were over 1,000 years old. They were neatly arranged on a shelf. Next to them were clay cylinders. When scholars translated these cylinders, they realized they were reading museum labels. The text described what the object was, who found it, and its history. This collection was curated by Princess Enigaldi Nana, the daughter of King Nabonidus. Nabonidus is often called the first archaeologist because he excavated the foundations of the ziggurat to find the original cornerstone of Ur-Nammu. His daughter created a space to display these finds. This means that 2,500 years ago, the people of Ur were already looking back at their own history, studying it, and preserving it in the world's first museum. So how does a civilization this advanced with museums, engineering, and law simply vanish? Ur wasn't destroyed by a nuclear war or a sudden cataclysm. It was destroyed by the very thing that created it, the water. The collapse of Ur is the ultimate environmental warning. For centuries, the Sumerians irrigated their fields with the waters of the Euphrates. But the water in this region carries a small amount of dissolved salt. When the water evaporates in the scorching 120-degree heat, the salt stays behind in the soil. Over 1,000 years, the water table rose, bringing the salt with it. The fields of Ur began to turn white. We can track this collapse in the accounting tablets. In 2400 BCE, wheat, a salt-intolerant crop, accounted for roughly 16% of the harvest. By 2100 BCE, it had dropped to 2%. By 1700 BCE, wheat was gone. They switched to barley, which is more salt-resistant. But eventually, even the barley failed. The yields collapsed. The food surplus that supported the army, the priests, and the king evaporated. The population starved. Weakened by famine, the city became easy prey for the Elamites, who sacked it in 2004 BCE. But the final nail in the coffin was the river itself. Choked by silt, the Euphrates shifted its course, moving miles away from the city. Ur was left high and dry, a port city without a river, abandoned to the encroaching desert. The Ziggurat of Ur still stands today, partially restored, casting a long shadow over the Iraqi desert. It is a monument to human ingenuity and a tombstone for environmental hubris. Ur teaches us that civilization is fragile. It can rise out of the mud with explosive speed, building wonders that touch the sky. But it can just as easily be strangled by the invisible accumulation of its own unintended consequences. From the first brick laid in the Ubaid period to the final museum label written by a princess, Ur is the story of us. It is the story of our ambition, our violence, and our inevitable struggle against the earth itself. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the origins of civilization, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. We are uncovering the lost history of the world, one excavation at a time. This is Ancient Chronicles HD.